Hey guys, Andy, Brenda, how's it going? Yeah, I did get a haircut. A little late. We were taping a show for a local Christian television network station over in Clearwater, and after I taped the show, I realized my hair was just out of control. So I go ahead and got a haircut. So thanks for noticing. Uh, oh, yeah. I'll go ahead and send you the link for it. Yeah, I do volunteer work at this nonprofit organization, and so they call us once in a while to to find out what's going on, and so they invited me in, and so you don't have to look at it if you don't want to, no, but for what it's worth, I'll go ahead and send you the link. All right. Uh, what do you guys want to talk about today? Oh, these things? Have you been wondering about these? Okay. Um, Andy, you okay if we talk about the post-it notes? No, okay. Uh, uh, these are props that are used when I talk about forgiveness. Yeah, that's it's a pretty heavy-duty subject, isn't it? And so, if you guys don't mind, I'm going to tell you about the post-it notes and forgiveness. Is that okay? All right. Okay. Well, forgiveness. Uh, at first, it wasn't much written about forgiveness, and I think it may have had to do with the fact that there's two big fallacies about forgiveness. One of them is, if you forgive someone, you should be able to forget, and if you remember, then maybe you haven't forgiven. Uh, and the other fallacy is, look, if I forgave this person, why can't I trust them? So there's been a lot of articles, scientific journals written into the subject of forgiveness, of how really we forgive, not necessarily for the other person, or the releases them, of course, no, from that debt, and we'll talk about it a little bit later. But it also, when we build on this resentment and anger towards a person and refuse to forgive them, uh, we're really like, and I heard somebody say it's like, uh, and I remember, I wish I could remember who said it, but it's like drinking poison. You drink the poison and you're watching for your enemy to fall. When really you're hurting yourself. You're hurting your mental health. You're hurting your internal organs. You could be getting heart problems and stomach problems and blood pressure problems and all that stuff. So when it comes to forgiveness, first of all, let's go uh, through the fallacies. Um, Forgive and forget. It doesn't happen because your limbic system, which is the most primitive part of your brain. Your limbic system has the amygdala and it has the hypothalamus, and the hypothalamus is where a lot of, well, basically, the way I like to think about it is, think of a warehouse full of all these files. I mean, row and rows and rows and rows of these files, and in each one of those manila folder files is something that you experienced, no, through one of your senses. It may be a taste, it may be a smell, it may be something you heard, it may be something you touched, maybe something you tasted, and it's in all of those manila envelopes. But once in a while, when there's an intense emotion that is paired with a particular image or a particular memory, I like to think of it as turning the Manila files into like blue or red or something like that. For example, if I were to ask you, Andy, what's your, and you too, Brenda, what is your earliest childhood recollection? Most likely, it would be something in the single digits, but it would be an event of extreme, mad, sad, glad, or scared, right? Yeah, yeah. Yeah. Now, if I were to ask you, now, what did you, No, what did you have for lunch 3.5 weeks ago? That's in a Manila folder, so you wouldn't be able to access it very easily. But when it comes to that particular emotion when you were young, that's a different color one, so you can find that one right away. So the fact is, whatever has happened in the past, we're always going to remember. We're never going to forget until we die, until our last breath, or whatever. Um, so even though we may have forgiven something, or it may have been a long, long time ago, you know, um, a certain smell, a certain word, a certain feeling, or whatever will trigger that, and you will remember. So when somebody has done something against you, has offended you, um, and it really hurts you, you may forgive them, but you will never forget. And what's interesting is that it may have happened 20, 30, 40 years ago. Uh, but when your mind is triggered and you remember that event, the emotion that's attached to it is intense. And it's so intense, it's as if it was happening at that moment, in real time. Even though it may have happened again decades ago, you feel it. And so, again, if somebody has hurt you and you remember that, you feel the sadness, let's say it was a sad feeling. You feel that sadness, and that sadness is a very real feeling, even though it happened a really long time ago. And so you will always live with that. And I was listening to this neurologist who was talking about the fact that, he called that, and the scientific term that he used was the first thought. So the first thought was the one that just popped into your head. No, just either triggered by something or for no reason whatsoever. And so you had this first thought that happened, and you're like, why in the world am I thinking about that? That happened so long ago, and I forgave that. It's like that means nothing. And so they try to pinpoint where in the brain that first thought occurs. If perchance they could find out where, then they could probably try to stop that first thought. And what they found out is that they couldn't find it. It didn't track. It didn't show up in their brain whatsoever. So at least at that moment, the best theory was that it was happening at the level of the mind, sort of like a different dimension. So when it comes to these thoughts that just pop into your head, for either a particular reason or no reason at all, those first thoughts, I know, big word, first thoughts, you couldn't see it coming, you couldn't stop it. However, once that first thought happened, then the big scientific phrase for that is that's your second thought. And you can, in your second thought, you could say, wow, I remember that, and that hurt me very much. Um, but that happened a long time ago, and I'm just letting that go. And then you can just move on, and then just distract yourself and do something else. So to forgive does not mean to forget, because you will never forget. Now, you, hopefully, with old age, you might forget things, and then I don't even remember what your name is. So, I've had people say like, "Hey, Bill, I need to apologize to you for something that I did," and I really have no recollection of it. And I have literally stopped him and said, "You know what? Please don't, because as far as I know, we're good." So I cannot remember anything, any way that you offended me in any way, shape, or form, and so we're good, we're fine. And of course, I think that's weird, but it's the truth. You know, no, I at that moment I had no recollection, and so to say to forgive and forget, um, it's a fallacy. Now, to say to forgive and trust, that's also a fallacy. Because, for example, right here in my room, I have a window. So let's say little Johnny comes in and he says, "Hey, Bill, can I play outside? Play ball outside your window?" I'm like, "Yeah, sure. No, knock yourself out." And so he's playing ball and hitting it with the bat, whatever. And the ball hits the bat wrong, and it comes back and it breaks my window. And so now the offense is more of a debt, and so he owes me a debt. I mean, I have a broken window. And so the father may come in, Johnny's father may come in and say, "Hey, Bill, I'm really sorry. Can I buy you a new window?" And I say, "Yeah, sure. That's fine." And so he spends however many hundreds of dollars, whatever, and he replaces my window. Now, let me ask you guys, after my window is replaced, Johnny comes back and he were to say to me, "Hey, do you mind if I play just outside your window, play ball outside your window?" What am I going to say? No, no. Now, I like the kid. The debt was paid, but just because he paid the debt doesn't mean that I trust him. And there's some people that may break our trust, and we may forgive them. And we're going to touch on exactly what forgiveness means. We may forgive them, but it doesn't mean that we necessarily trust them. So again, the fallacies are forgive and forget. No, no, physiologically doesn't happen. Forgive and trust. No, that doesn't happen. Now I may just trust him completely, but if I were to say, "Johnny, you should probably go somewhere else," it's like, "But I thought you forgave me." I did, but no, no, you can go ahead and play back at the park or whatever. So those are the two fallacies. So now let's talk about forgiveness. If when a person offends, let's say they offend me, um, my reaction is, you owe me. Like you owe me an apology. You owe me an explanation. And in our language we have that. Why? Because we see it as a debt. This person did something and they incurred a debt. And so we want them to pay the debt. Now, no, Johnny's dad, the debt was a broken window, and he paid for the broken window. Everything's fine and dandy. I still don't trust Johnny. He still can't play there. No, but I've let that go because I got a brand new window, and that's kind of cool. But if a person has really offended me, like um, let's say my spouse cheated on me, um, that's a really serious offense, and and there's nothing that my spouse can do that will ever pay that debt. There's not enough money. Uh, and there's nothing that my spouse can do that can make that debt disappear. I mean, the harm, the broken trust is going to be there forever. I will never forget it. And I will forever be hurt by what that spouse did to me. Uh, and and just because I let it go, and I will explain the letting it go. Um, just because I let it go and forgave, that doesn't mean I get to trust them either. If I want them to reconcile and repair that trust, and I have to be open to allow them to repair that trust, I may say, "No, we're done. I'm not in the least bit interested in have you regain my trust. We're done. You get an attorney, I'm getting an attorney, and it's done." So let's talk about what forgiveness. If forgiveness is not forgetting, if forgiveness is not finally trusting, then what is it? Well, number one, when you forgive a person, it doesn't go away. It doesn't just vanish into thin air. It is still there. So each one of these post-it notes is supposed to represent things that people have done against me. Ways that they have offended me, ways that they have hurt me. Now, I could I could, and I'm just gonna not grab one of those, but grab one of these. I could just do this every time I see that person, and having that on my mind, front and center of my mind, is going to keep me from having any kind of relationship with that person. And of course, it looks kind of silly, and I really won't be able to function very well. So if this represents, like each one of those, it represents something that a person has done against me. If I were to just forgive and said, you know what, forget about it. Again, you can't forget about it because it just doesn't go away, or pretend like it never happened. No, it happened, and it's here, and it's very real. And to say, well, I can still trust. Well, not necessarily. And again, it's here, and the debt is there. And if the debt is great, and that person could never pay it back, you know, just not. But even if they were to be faithful for the rest of their lives, they can never make that infidelity disappear or go away, and that hurt and that pain will still be there. So as the hurt partner, what do I do? I may go ahead and demand that they pay a debt that it's impossible for them to pay. So then I become a debt collector. And as a debt collector, now I'm expecting them to pay the debt, which again, they cannot pay. And so I may call them. So when you're going to make it right, I may email them. When you're going to make it right, I may text them. When are you going to make it right? I may snail mail. When are you going to make it right? And again, they can never make it right. And if I'm going to be this debt collector to try to collect a debt that can never be satisfied, I'm going to be miserable. Not only am I going to be miserable for the rest of my life, but I'm going to have ulcers, I'm going to have heart problems and blood pressure problems and mental health problems or whatever. So forgiveness means I'm taking that debt that you owe me, and I'm going to absorb the cost. You don't have to pay it. I'm going to absorb the cost. And then what I'm doing is I am going to put it here. I'm going to put it behind me where I'm not looking at it. And there's been times when my bride has offended me, and seriously, it happens very, very rarely. But when she's offended me and she asks for forgiveness, you know, um, and I have purposely said, I forgive you, and I'm not going to bring it up anymore. What I'm saying is, during one of the arguments, another argument that we may have, and yes, healthy couples argue, but that's another one. Um, the temptation is to reach back and grab it and show it to them. Yeah, well, what about this? But what I'm doing when I'm forgiven is I'm saying I am acknowledging the fact that you can never pay this debt, and I'm going to put it behind me, and I'm not going to look at it purposely. I'm not turning around and looking at it. Now, my bride may look at me and see the forgiven offense right over my right shoulder. And she may say, wow, I offended him. I hurt his feelings over it. And he's not bringing it up. And so I'm not going to look at it. I'm purposely not going to revisit it. Like my bride, when she sees me and she sees this, she's not going to forget either. And that's always going to be there. But out of my love for her and out of my own mental health and physical health, yeah. And so the truth is, we all have all of these post-it notes over our right shoulder or even our left shoulder, things that people um, have done against us. And we have to purposely to forgive. We have to say, I'm going to absorb the cost of that. I'm not going to expect for you to pay it. I'm going to put it behind me, and I'm going to purposely not revisit that anymore. And that's what those post-it notes are about. And maybe as I grow older, or the tape grows older, they start falling off. And that's what I'm hoping, that with old age, as I grow older, the glue of the post-it notes will grow older, and those things will just fall down and be, and and even if I were to look back there, they won't be there anymore. And so, homework assignment, um, for your sake, um, and secondarily for the sake of the person who's offended you. And before I forget, even if they don't ask for forgiveness, forgive them, just let it go. Put it behind you. Now your life will be so much better, so much healthier if you don't carry all of that resentment with you. So acknowledge the pain, and if you're brave enough, absorb the cost, put it behind you, and if you're brave enough and courageous enough, don't bring it up again. So yeah, I gotta go. So do with it as you please. Again, my recommendation is that you live a life of forgiveness, and that you don't hold any grudges. Um, Again, good seeing you, and we hope to see you next week. Okay, thanks. Bye bye.